Hello, Mr. Jones. Welcome to History 101 with me, Zion Wagema. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important events in U.S. history, the Civil War. This war shaped the country in ways that still affect us today. So grab a seat, take a drink, because we're embarking on a journey through the Civil War. What it was, why it was, and what it really meant to America. I'm going to make it nice and easy to understand. But don't worry, I'll also be throwing in some nasty facts you don't know. Before we actually get straight into the video, I want to thank today's sponsors: History.com, PBS, the American Battlefield Trust, National Park Service Civil War, National Archives Civil War Records, Library of Congress, the Civil War Trust, Overview of the Civil War, National War Museum, Smithsonian Institution, Civil War, History Channel, American Civil War, the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, Civil War, and the Civil War Institute at Gettysburg College. They helped me a lot. They helped me get my facts in order. So a big thank you to them. And of course, all of their links will be in the description. So let's get started. The North no longer desired slavery, as now they use factories. In the South, well, the South, they needed it. The South's economy was agricultural, and it was mainly cotton. And they made the slaves do all of the work. Yeah, those people were lazy, right? But the North industrialized itself and never needed slavery again. They started finally to pass laws to abolish it. And really, that is when things did indeed get pretty tight between the two areas. So then, when Abraham Lincoln became president in 1860, the South lost its mind. Lincoln was very anti-slavery, thankfully, and he did not want to spread it to the new states. But when he became president, some southern states were so upset about it that they decided to cede, or essentially leave the United States, and form their own country, the Confederate States of America. And who was their president? Jefferson Davis. But he's not important. So when Lincoln became president in March of 1861, the country was already split in half. Lincoln's Union was trying to keep the country together, and Davis's Confederacy was trying to break away and continue slavery. Now, on to the first big occurrence of the Civil War. On April 12, 1861, the Confederates began bombarding the U.S. military installation called Fort Sumter in South Carolina. That was essentially the war's. All right, let me just do. Now, on to the first big occurrence of the Civil War. On, on April 12th, 1861, the Confederates began bombarding a U.S. military installation called Fort Sumter in South Carolina. That was essentially the war's first shot. Lincoln, of course, wanted to keep the Union together, so he requested soldiers to fight, and then subsequently, the war just erupted. It wasn't one battle, it was 1,000 battles. It was 1,000 battles throughout the nation, and both sides fought for what they thought was right. The war wasn't begun as a war to end slavery. In fact, Lincoln had initially attempted to maintain the Union single-handedly. But during the course of the war, the issue of slavery kept getting increasingly difficult to ignore, especially when the newly released bestseller Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, that illustrates to everyone the true brutality of slavery, was published. Lincoln stepped into the giant leap in 1863 when he made the Emancipation Proclamation. It was a strong proclamation that proclaimed all the slaves in the Confederate States to be free. It freed not one of them at once, but it was a giant step in the direction they had to move. And it gave the Union a new war goal: freedom for all the slaves. It made it more evident, too, that the war was not so much fought so that the war was not so much fought so that the nation would stay one, but so that slavery would be eradicated in the United States of America. So let's talk about some of the most well-known battles. The largest and greatest Civil War battle was the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863 in Pennsylvania. It was a tremendous Union turning point. The Confederates under General Robert E. Lee were trying to invade the North, and had they won this battle, they might have ended the war. but the Union under General George Meade fought hard and won. It was a turning point in the way it showed that the Confederacy could be defeated. The Union started gaining momentum after that. There was another significant event when General Lee had surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant, the flippin' goat, at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia on April 9th, 1865. It was the end of the Civil War in formal terms, but although the war was over, its consequences were still on. So what did the nation do after the Civil War? Well, the country was in poor condition. Thousands of people had lost their lives. The economy of the South had been destroyed, and everyone was really angry and hateful towards each other. This period after the war is known as Reconstruction, and it was about rebuilding the South and trying to figure out what to do with the recently freed slaves. Maybe the most significant product of the war was the 13th Amendment, which declared slavery officially over in America. This was historic because it freed millions of African Americans from bondage after nearly 300 years of suffering. But just because the slavery, wait, oh, 3 decades? Oh, that's not 300 years. Okay. This was historic because it freed millions of African Americans from bondage after nearly 3 decades of suffering. But just because slavery was gone didn't mean that all was well. There was an overwhelming amount of segregation and racism, especially in the South, where the slaves had no work any longer, no property, and even no vote. So while slavery was ended by the war, not everything was set straight. Even now, the war has passed for more than 150 years, yet its impact continues to show itself today. The Civil War changed the Americans' worldview towards freedom, rights, and equality. The war set the stage for the 20th century civil rights movement, and it taught us that no American no longer had to be divided over being free or slave. The war was also taught us that the function of the federal government, which is that the government can make laws that pertain to the whole country, even if the states do not agree. We still remember today's Civil War because this was the time when America struggled to maintain its values. The wars, the people, and the events in the world still shape the individual we are as a country. So in short, the Civil War was a colossal fight against slavery, but a fight for the soul and heart of America. It was a battle between two inherently dissimilar halves of the country, one that sought to end slavery and one that sought to keep it. It changed the trajectory of history, ended slavery, and propelled the country towards a more equal tomorrow, even though the tomorrow was miles and miles away. That's all for today's History 101 with me. I sure hope that you learned a lot about the Civil War and why it's such a big deal. If you have any questions, make sure to read the resources that I used today. History.com, PBS, The American Battlefield, Trust National Park Service, Civil War, National Archives, Civil War Records, Library of Congress, The Civil War Trust. If you have any questions, make sure to check out my awesome sources. Thanks for watching, and remember to comment or contact me if you have any more questions that the sources didn't answer. Until next time, keep learning and keep uncovering the past. Until we meet again, Mr. Jones.